Well, welcome to Saturday. Welcome to the Way Forward Show. And we're so glad that you guys have chosen to spend some time with us on a Saturday. We love it when our folks show up in droves. We're going to be streaming this on YouTube and a variety of platforms. Look forward to your comments and your ideas and thoughts. We're going to have to pre-record this one because, well, Jason and I are busy, but we're going to be talking about some of the big stories that are on the horizon, on the landscape. And we want you guys to help us to do that. And so even though the comment section is turned on, and even though we're not presently actually here, we want you guys still to make comments. It helps the algorithm out. We want you guys to smash that like button. We want you guys to join in and participate. And so we are just set in a few moments to get to it. Some big stories. What are the big ideas, the big crises that we see on the horizon? What are the big stories? What are the things that are going to endure throughout this season? We're so glad that you guys have chosen to spend some time with us. Let me get Jason on the show. And without further ado, get him to school.
Morning.
School is in session, my friend.
What's going on, man?
It's going on, man. It is going on.
Yeah.
First time Way Forward, we're back, and man, it's been a quite a pause, but the world has shifted a number of times since the last time we had a show.
It seems like it does that like every year. There's nothing we can never run out of something to talk about. It's always crazy in the times we live. So
I know it's almost like they knew that we were going to do a live stream show. And they were like, "Hey, man, these brothers need some content, man. Let's go act crazy for a little bit. Let's go say some crazy stuff and talk crazy and do all the different things."
Yeah.
And so these guys will have something to talk about. But no, there's no shortage of crazy out there, and there's no shortage of stories that are out there that just, make you scratch your head, and some that we can look at and we can kind of predict, and others that are kind of like, we didn't see that one coming.
Wow. Yeah.
And so we'll definitely be on that. A lot of what it is that we talk about on this show, or at least some of it, is race and reconciliation and those kind of subject matters. And so just dig in with us. We're going to be probably touching on a lot of different things throughout the course of it. It's the Way Forward. I'll give you guys the introduction, and in about 40 seconds, we'll be back and ready to rock and roll. I'm here with my good friend, Jason Plummer, pastor of First Baptist Church in Litchfield, Illinois. Sir, would you lead us in prayer? Because if we don't do that, we hadn't done anything.
We ain't done anything. Father in heaven, we're so thankful, Lord, for your kindness and goodness this morning. And we ask for just grace and wisdom as we talk through issues that are above our pay grade, Lord, but are within your sovereignty and your care. And just help us to be a fruit to the church and to the community and the home. And let our discussion, Lord, help others to discuss well these big topics we talk about with love and compassion and care. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, we got some big stories, but Jason, we've been no strangers to controversy throughout the seasons that we've been a part of this experience. And, we're going to keep it a buck. This season, we're not going to shy away from controversy. And in fact, I may introduce some controversy even as we begin this season, because I'd like to invite a special guest on, special guest. Can you tell me who this is?
It's White Jesus.
White Jesus.
That's right.
We got White Jesus who's going to come and help us out this season.
White Jesus. It's good.
Sometimes we might have Black Jesus come on and help us out with some of these stories.
You could just watch people leaving right now. Like
the count is going down exponentially as we go through this.
I ain't hitting your algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you just leave us a nasty comment or a snarky comment, We would certainly love
Uh,
to have you help us boost up the ratings on this show
that's right.
and jumping up the algorithm. But no, we've talked about, race and reconciliation. We've had some
Uh,
pushback on certain things. And, you
mhm.
know, I just go ahead and say this at the beginning of the season. We always welcome you guys' comments. I think that we're in an era in which people are so contentious and so divisive about various things that
Yeah.
I actually almost, and I, somebody's going to say, you remember that day when you said you wanted this? But I almost want there to be people who bring a contentious spirit to this show and people who are naysayers and those that will participate in this experience, because I think it gives us the opportunity to show the kind of kindness and humility
Mhm.
that should be expected of us. But I think that as we're modeling things, I think you and I, because of our relationship and because of some of our history, we'll be able to do that. Hopefully, prayerfully.
Hey, look, it's not that we don't get frustrated because we've even gotten frustrated with each other at times. It's that that the gospel has to do something to temper and bring wisdom and love and compassion to the discussion at some point where we don't walk away from the table just hating each other. We just come
Yeah,
back and keep digging. And I feel like the culture, it's just so easy to toss relationships like you're gone, you're out, you're done,
yeah.
cancel you out. Uh,
Cancel culture.
yeah.
Yes.
So even I tell we talk about it as a house because I'm so funny because YouTube I'm not nearly as boisterous as I am in the house. When I'm in the house, with my family or I'm on the couch, I can get loud and obnoxious and be silly. Um, but it's never so much to the point where oh dad doesn't like us or my friends are like man he's hating on us. It's just there's always the gospel always brings this temperament that says hey wait a minute we need to value that relationship above even my political views or whatever my
Hmm.
may be at the time. So I feel like we have an opportunity to do that every season we get together. We have an opportunity to try to model that. So I say all that as a precursor that if I'm having a Saturday where I just get after it, it doesn't mean I've lost my mind or I've lost my religion. How about that?
There you go. Well, if you start getting into it, you guys just already need to know that the gospel choir is going to come out.
Uh, my praise break.
Yes, your
I know.
praise. Hey, preacher, if you start getting into it,
Yeah,
the black church is not going to disappoint you.
that's right.
We will come to your aid.
That's right.
So let
Solar.
me do this really quickly and then we'll get started.
Mm.
According to the Copyright Act, Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, all of the comments that we're making today fall under the category of fair use, such as criticism, comments, news, reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. So, with that in mind, let's get to the top story. All right, sir, take it away. You got the first big story on the horizon. What do you think it's going to be?
Well, I think it's going to revolve around political dysfunction. To be honest with you,
Mm,
um, or I was tempted to say political instability, but I think there is a distinction between those two terms because there are countries out there that's got severe political instability, and they don't know if they're coming or going politically, and um, and there's a coup at any moment, and instability means that the country's not functioning, it's not working. That's not us. We're not there. We're not there yet. What I do think we have is a lot of dysfunction, crazy dysfunction.
mm,
And I think part of that dysfunction is revolving around the two-party system we have, and the two parties that we have are not happy with each other at all. And it's just gotten this crazy divide. We have become so polarized that we cannot find common ground, and we're using rhetoric right now um, on both sides of the aisle, and I'm hearing it a lot right now on the liberal side of the aisle, which is if you don't vote liberal, you're going to destroy democracy. Like I'm hearing that,
yeah,
and I'm sure the other side is giving the exact same message. But I'm just hearing
sure.
like
And
Nancy,
it is. I
yeah,
can verify that.
yeah, Nancy Pelosi has been the one I've been hearing the most so far, but I guarantee you that Tucker Carlson and those guys are pushing the same agenda. But when you have this idea that you're going to destroy democracy, and our rhetoric is so high right now that if you don't do this thing, it's going to be absolute catastrophe. And every time they've said that, they've been wrong, by the way. But we have this great dysfunction. And I do think we have election integrity issues. We've had them for a long time. This is nothing new. One of the biggest problems that the progressives had is, and still have, is that the conservatives supposedly have done this gerrymandering and have made elections go their direction. On the other side of that aisle is that now that we're doing the mail-in balloting, there's going to be some rigging there. And so now you have these accusations flying. They're flying on both sides of the aisle. And what it's creating is extreme dysfunction in our politics and our governance. And then that's not even to say that the incompetence that we're seeing in our government is just at an all-time high. Like it's So that's I think that's going to bust the headlines. I think that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, I think with the midterm elections, which is something I put on my list as well, coming up, you're going to see another round of all of those different ingredients that you put in that explanation there. You're going to see the discussions about elections, and was this a fair election? Was the voting?
They're already shooting that out. Like both sides have already said this is not going to be a fair election.
Yeah. So that ingredient is already there.
Right.
You've got some levels of just the rhetoric. Like if we're we're having a conversation and all of a sudden, like Proverbs 15:1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. And I decide to use incendiary language. Well, I've already sort of seasoned the culture and the atmosphere to be able to have these kind of contentious discussions.
Well,
and so that ingredient is already there on both sides.
I'm glad you said that because what you just said there is the epitome of all of our discussions right now, whether it's political or social, whatever, is that the incendiary comments are feeding this idea that I need to rebuttal back with more incendiary, and there's no gospel. It's like the sinful condition has just exploded, and now we can't have a decent conversation about hand sanitizer without things going south. My bad. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, that's okay. We have crying babies in the background, so I lost my train of thought for a second. Anyway,
those words are a big deal to me. I preach this all day long in my church community home. Words have consequences, like real consequences, and you got to watch big time what comes out of your mouth.
Yeah. Well, that is certainly one that we will be watching in all of its various facets here. We're quickly coming up on those midterm elections, and so too is the temperature in our culture, and then obviously the fallout from that. I'm wondering and this is just one of the ones that was on my agenda here today. I'm wondering, the war in Ukraine, it's not disconnected from that, but we've kind of entered a phase now where we're seeing some resiliency from Ukraine, and we're seeing some support kind of in the wings from other nations for Ukraine. And they seem to have, I will say, almost stabilized that situation. Then it could be a nuclear disaster, a nuclear fallout next week. But they seem to have stabilized that situation and kind of pushed Vladimir Putin into a position where he's got some really tough decisions that he's got to make in terms of, is it going to be a withdrawal, partial withdrawal? Does he change the narrative? We've already begun to see some of those things where he's saying, okay, we're just going to annex these places. He's got massive disapproval in his own country, and there's the fallout from that, and people being imprisoned, and just another round of just this, atrocious socialism that we're watching unfold before our eyes. And so what is the effect of that? I wonder, as I'm watching some of the news stories about Ukraine, where that's going to position them and where that's going to position Russia. And then certainly what our response to that is going to be, it in the backdrop of political instability, if you will, in our own country, and how our national leaders may be responding to or respond to any type of continued provocation from Russia.
These
don't look good.
Yeah. Well, I think automatically Ukraine is going to look like, is going to come out on top. I think that the way their president has, I mean, he has modeled leadership the way our world loves leadership. I mean, here's a guy, he didn't bail from his country. He got right on the front lines. I mean, if you want to talk about like the American epitome of male leadership, especially like back in the 50s and 60s,
Yeah.
that's it, man.
He's moxie.
He's got the swagger. He's a good-looking chap. He's a fighter. He gets in there. I mean, there are people looking at him thinking that's the kind of leadership we want. Now you got to go back to Ukraine before this whole thing started, and Ukraine was not exactly the poster child for democracy and integrity and all those things. There's a lot of things going on there that was not good, but they get thrown, they get bullied around a little bit, and the world comes to their aid, and now he's looking good. I actually think this whole thing contributes to a more globalist mentality. I think Russia is an example of what happens when a country doesn't fall in line, and how the global community can come around and make sure, because Ukraine has been funded by many countries. I mean, especially our country.
Oh, yeah.
Sending billions of dollars to their aid. And you've had this kind of global network, so to speak, happen. And Putin has realized just how sad his conditions are. One of the problems that in socialist countries is this idea of cooking the books, and we're going to make things look better than they really are. But once you start getting to the nitty gritty, you realize that things are not functioning well. Well, when he put his military in there, he realized that his military is not nearly as strong as he thought it was, or that his logistics were as good as he thought, because by the numbers, Russia should have just swallowed Ukraine, but it didn't. And
I think he thought that. I'm pretty sure
yeah.
I thought that. I think
Yep.
those were some of the discussions that we were having in our home. Like, why is he doing this? Because he
Yep.
thinks he can just go in and just
Yep.
wipe them out,
Yep, and then
knock them down, kind of like we've seen in Iraq and some of the other places
Yep.
where there's a destabilization in the military and in the government, and then another, Taliban or somebody just comes in and just wipes everybody out. And it's like,
Yep.
what did we put all that infrastructure in place? They just wiped it out in like 2 days. I think he thought he was going to go into Ukraine and do
just
a very
handle it.
similar thing and just
Yep.
take it over.
And what you have is this kind of globalist ideology that is very prominent, and especially in Western countries. And I think in the end of the day, they're saying this is working. This is working. And so I think that's what the news story will be, essentially how globalism is working.
If you want to join the discussion, the comment section is on. We've got a variety of topics that we're going to be talking about, but what are your thoughts so far in terms of instability within our own political system? Incompetence, that word has been used. Ooh, that's kind of incendiary, Jason. Incompetence in our own government.
Yeah.
What do you think about the elections midterm? Where do you think we're going as a country and as a nation? Do you think that's going to be a story that continues to go into 2023? And then also, we've talked about Ukraine and the situation in Ukraine. What are your thoughts on that? Drop that in the comment section. It does help the algorithm out. Agree with us, disagree with us, see a different aspect of that. Please post that on the show. All right, Jason, give us another one.
Ooh, I'm in the thick of Tending the Vine right now, and I've been paying attention to some things. I think
explain what Tending the Vine is for those that may be their first time watching the show or listening to the show. What is Tending the Vine?
Tending the Vine is an after-school program that takes kids who need help in math and reading in school, and we essentially mentor them, and we work really hard at bringing a kind of a holistic, what we call biblical mentoring approach to their lives. A very robust belief in the gospel and a very robust belief in education, and so we are trying to shore these kiddos up from K to third grade. It's great. It's a wonderful time, and we are plugging along and doing really well, and I love it. One of the things we're seeing, though, is education in America is been exposed. It's always had its issues. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's been in the news as far as back in the 50s and 60s. But we have found that education is actually a lot is sicker than we thought as far as the system goes. It's so much so that there's a massive teacher shortage that
Mhm.
is happening. And it's only going to get worse at this point because at least the state I'm living in, they are doing nothing to stop the bleeding. Nothing.
Okay.
Okay, so
Okay.
one example that we're seeing in Illinois is they're passing legislation down in the curriculum to be a really heavily politically activist type curriculum. They are integrating sex ed at a much lower age, and of course, they're integrating the LGBT philosophy at a very young age. One of the things I just had a discussion with a parent last week that they're concerned about fifth graders learning about oral and anal sex in fifth grade from the school. And so those are the conversations the community's having right now. And they're seeing it coming down. And so now you're putting these teachers in this really interesting spot that they have not been put in before, where some of these teaching points are really at odds with their value system.
Mhm. Mhm.
The problem is the state holds the threat of losing your license or your retirement or something over them. And now what do? I've got 17 years in, and I don't believe in teaching this stuff, but yet if I don't, I'm going to lose everything I've worked for. And so those are the conversations we're seeing that are happening right now.
Yeah, I did a story on that in my other show, on the Erskine Music Show. You can go back and check that out, the teacher shortage discussion, because there are those on both sides of the issue. Imagine that. There's two sides of this issue. There's those who say, well, actually, teacher shortages and educational crisis is really something that's not new in our country, and it's just a way of going about handling it. We have allocation of billions of dollars for educational purposes that are either being squandered or they're being misallocated or they're not being allocated. Then you've got teachers who are complaining about pay and the rate of increase in the hours that are worked, the impersonal environment that has been created where there's a distance between even the teacher and the students because there's so much paperwork and so many administrative things that now need to be done. There's a variety of reasons that are out there why we're not retaining teachers, why new teachers are not coming on, why there's a shortage. And it's interesting to see, Jason, how different states are responding to that. The Economist, if you read such an article or newspaper or journal, would say really the teacher fallout is not as broad as we would think it is. It's just in a couple of different places where it's kind of extenuated. And I would say
They're
I
wrong.
do think that maybe nationally and internationally that should catch our attention to the degree where we begin to say something has got to change, because if we're looking at a trend, even if it's 10 states, the trend is it's going to be 15 states, 20 states, 30 states, 35 states before too much longer where this is an absolute crisis. And it gets at the very core nature of our education, the foundations of our culture and our society, and what we believe about things and what we understand to be the truth of things. Jason, I'm sure you would agree that as the Bible tells us, people perish for the lack of knowledge. Biblically speaking, living in such a biblically illiterate, and I say that based on some of George Barna's reports, biblically illiterate society has caused problems within the church and the culture because people don't know the basic things about what God has said, basic definitions of what God has given, and thus we go off into a tangent or a difficult area in our society. And so educationally, the same thing is plausible, that we don't know some basic things that we need to know in order to move forward as a culture.
Yeah, and I think the idea that people say like, "Well, we've always had a teacher shortage," that's just a cop out. That's a cop out answer
Sure,
because I
people
just
like that.
yeah, well, it's just it's like it's so ridiculous. Then in my mind, when people who say that don't have a skin in the game, you start dealing with the institution, you start dealing with the people, and you start actually having real conversations, and you start talking to real families and real kids, and you realize that teacher shortage is a real problem. You're not just having a teacher shortage of like bodies in the classroom, you're actually having competency shortages as well. You're having people who have gotten in this idea that I can collect the check and I can my summers off and I can do. There's a shortage all around. Like this is not just a body in a classroom. There's a philosophy of education that the United States has adopted that is not equipping and training our teachers to actually be as productive as they could be. And you've got good people in those classrooms. Like, I'm not saying that all these teachers are just bad people. That's not the case. Many of the teachers I know are excellent people and they're doing the best they can, but the system they're in is screwing them over.
Yeah.
And it's messing over the entire thing. And the solution that Illinois has is let's be more progressive. Let's be more activists. Let's teach these kids about gender fluidity, and let's get them into this ideology versus math and reading and science and all the stuff that goes. Again, the solutions to the problems that we're seeing are coming from this ideology that's not working, which we both contend is because there's a lack of the gospel in the community. We're refusing clarity and we're choosing foolishness and ignorance, and it's having real consequences. And I work with kids and families and who are suffering these consequences, so I see it. So I'm a little more passionate because I'm like, you can write your articles all day long, but until you have to like send kids home and deal with families and talk to teachers and hear those frustrations, I'm just.
Jason said, I ain't hearing that nonsense.
I ain't got time for it, man. Like I just ain't got time for it. So
well, I think that's probably indicative of probably a lot of things, right? Let's go back to COVID. Let's get as controversial as we possibly can. If you lived in rural America where there were 0.2 cases per month, as opposed to living in Chicago or New York, your level of how impactful COVID was dramatically different.
Yeah.
If you're able to say, I don't know anybody around me who's ever gotten COVID, or, it's just not even around where we're at, as opposed to somebody who's saying, yeah, I've had 4 family members that died last week of COVID. There's two radically different ways of approaching that. And you're in the thick of education and you're in the thick of a state we call Illinois. Let's just extract the Chicago Bears out of that place and then plant them somewhere else. We love the Bears. We just don't love all the things that go on in Illinois. But I digress. But you're in a state where these kind of conversations, especially I'll just go ahead and say it, radical agenda in education are being jettisoned upon teachers and communities at an alarming rate. And unfortunately, the response to that has to be among those who have convictions. We're just not going to teach that. If this means we can't be involved in the education, public education, then we're going to have to go and do something else because we just will not teach that.
And I wish that was stronger, but the problem is a lot of the young teachers have drank the Kool-Aid, and they're in there, and you have teachers who, they're just scared. I'll talk to them one-on-one and they'll be good. Value system is very similar and they don't believe in it, but man, I've got 13, 14 years and I got a massive retirement. If I screw this up, I'm talking about my future. And they're just not at a place where like, hey, I'm just going to do my time. And I got one friend of mine, he's counting down, like, what was it, 7 years? He's counting the days down that he can, before he has to get out.
Yeah.
And that's the real bad spot they're in, and I don't blame them or look down on them. They're in a tough, between a rock and a hard place spot is where they are. And we try to support them as much as we can, but it's crazy. And I know if Illinois is doing it, New York and California have just got to be off the charts. I'd hate to be in that. And hey, look, my oldest daughter is going into education. We're having these discussions all the time. I'm telling her, you better make sure you're called by God because you've got an uphill fight ahead of you.
Well, we're at the 7th inning stretch. We're going to come back and talk about a couple of more stories before we get done. Let's take a quick stretch break, dance break, and we'll get the cut-ins a little bit better on this. But here we go.
Just dance, everybody. We're gonna raise them like a party. Just dance to the music.
All right, top stories today are the big stories that are in our culture. Have we missed anything so far? And what do you guys think? Maybe we're about to talk about something that you would put at the top of your list. Top stories for today. All right, Jason, give us another one.
Well, I mean, the economy's too easy. I mean, I just think that's a no-brainer.
The price of gas.
The price
All
of
right,
gas.
show's over.
Yeah.
We're gonna blow the whole thing up. Here you go, Jason.
Do you know about the price of gas, at least in Illinois, is we got a governor and he got into office and the first thing he did was jack our gas prices up by the first time was like 30 cents, the next time was 20 some odd cents or something like that. But we saw this massive 50-cent increase pretty much in our gas prices. And we're just like, good grief. I mean, we're already struggling. So people are trying to get to Missouri to get gas and all that good stuff.
And energy prices are going to go
up. And then this guy comes back and says, hey, you know, with all the gas prices, we're going to cut you a break and we're going to get rid of the gas tax for like a little bit. You know, we're going to bring those gas. We're going to help you out and do this. And I'm looking at him like, help me out. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? Like you, yeah, right.
White Jesus would not approve of this.
I was like, come on, man. You jack us up and then you take us down like you're doing us a favor. Yeah. And then energy costs is my energy cost. My Ameren bill, we were at like a $200 plus. Like we actually had credits, you know, because we had insulated our house and we did these energy efficient things. And I'm like, man, we're rolling. We're good.
You're a good soldier, a good community soldier.
All of a sudden now we're at like a $400 deficit. I mean, it just like that. It just switched like that. And then
I love how you're just coming and speaking with firsthand knowledge. Like, don't try to tell me that this is not an issue.
That's right.
My house is over at address on Jackson Street. Hey, folks that live in that house know you lied.
You should be with my wife when we got to go grocery shopping. Like it's traumatic sometimes. You sit there like, you know, we've only got this much money and you come home and I got 5 kids. I got
mouths to feed around there.
I got 5 kids and I work. So don't bust my chops about having so many kids. You should know, but I bust my tail.
That's the Midwest for you, baby. That's the Midwest. I love it.
Yeah.
I love that Midwest grittiness that you got going on here. Brother, we're going to take up an offering. We gospel choir. Y'all get warmed up here. Hallelujah. We're going to take up an offering for you today. We need to help this man out.
And it's crazy is we don't run our credit cards amok. We have one car payment.
He's responsible, people.
I have a 1999 F-150 that we don't drive out of Litchfield very far.
Come on, where's the offering banner? You guys can scan the QR code. Help this man out. He's driving it. What year Ford is that you're driving?
1999.
A 1999. My kids are just like, was there anything ever that came before the 2000s?
I've got
like, Dad, you were alive in the 1990s?
I still roll up my windows like
the man is rolling up his window. I'm still rolling up my window in the Corolla too, but that's okay.
So I say all that because it's my neighbors are the same way, and we're sitting there looking at this saying, this is insane. Like, I don't know what America you're living in. My congressional leaders, my president, like, I know that you've got this perpetual bank account. It seems like that things are just fine, but you start making these policies, and I'm telling you the truth, man. Like, it gets difficult. It gets hard. It gets hard, man. And I don't know how people do it who don't have a belief that God is sovereign and He's a good Father, because that's at the end of the day. Part of my ceiling collapsed, and I had to pay to fix the whole ceiling, actually, because when part of it collapses, pretty much the whole thing might as well collapse because we got a water leak. That took my savings, bro.
The man is in poverty here.
Now,
if you guys
be careful with poverty, because I'm not. I don't want to go that. I don't want to go that route because I know people in poverty, and I wouldn't say I'm there. But what I'm trying to say is these are issues that this economy is not pie in the sky ideology, and these decisions you guys are making that you think is going to propel us into this best utopian America. You're insane. You're insane.
All right.
Because this is not utopia for so many of us over here. This is man, thank God for Salvation Army and thank God for these places that you can just go and get used stuff, because for a lot of families around here that ain't working. What I'm really afraid of is when we have a catastrophe, so many of our families are literally one paycheck away from poverty. And
that does boil down to some things that gets real right there. I'm over here pushing buttons and making jokes and stuff, but that does get to the very real nature. We've got a hurricane, Ian, that has affected the west coast of Florida, and there'll be other disasters invariably. But that does get down to the level of, let's turn the corner now, the church, and our response as the church, and people's response in the church and in the culture. And what does that look like? I mean, because these issues, like we're talking about today, these issues aren't going away, and the politicians aren't just automatically going to go off the scene. They may get voted out, and then another round of bad leaders come in.
And they're going to get paid. Like AOC is getting paid. The squad is getting paid. I just don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear them spew their rhetoric, because they go back to their apartments and they eat their food and they drive their cars and they do their stuff and they're getting paid. The whole lot of them.
Life is good.
Are getting paid.
Hey, look, white Jesus would agree with this, but Black Lives Matter. Like, those folks, they got paid.
They got paid.
They got paid.
And they're living large.
And
they ain't sharing the wealth either.
Some Black lives out here that matter.
Right? Right?
My Black lives and my kids' Black lives.
Right.
Voices and concerns. Y'all didn't seem to take up all of those, but no, that's okay. That's okay. That's why we can come and do this show and get ourselves banned from everything.
The thing is like, I just want to have a real conversation. I'm not mad at people. Like, I'm not angry because
he ain't mad.
Again, my Father in heaven has said, I'm a good father. If you being evil can give good gifts to your kids, how much more can I take care of you? He goes on in Romans and says, if I didn't spare my own son, how much more will I take care of you? So at the end of the day, the gospel gives me the rock. When Jesus says, build your house on a rock, and I'm building my house on my rock, right? And so that house is fine. But that doesn't mean I don't feel the burden that my neighbors feel and everyone else feels around me when the government starts tearing down the very house I'm trying to build, or my neighbors are trying to build, or because they've got these crazy ideologies, or I'm looking at my kids in my program and I know for a fact what they're walking into.
Now that is poverty.
Is not flourishing, right? Yeah. They're not flourishing, and the government's promising all this flourishing, but they're not flourishing. That's the reality. So when all those people, I don't care who you are, whether you're Mitch McConnell, you're Nadler, all you guys, don't preach to me your gospel. It ain't working. I don't hear it.
Yeah, we're gonna land the plane with the gospel of Jesus Christ, that and that alone. But I will say, living in a city in Nashville, Tennessee, for those of you who are wondering, living in a city where there's such immense gentrification that's going on, you literally could, like, I have the sense that from being in your town, like, as a town, people recognize the cultural moment and sort of the cultural ethos, so to speak, when it comes to challenges that are being faced. When you're in a city, you literally, bro, especially a gentrified city, you can go from block to block, and the realities of the people who live there are so totally different that for a certain segment of streets and even houses on the street, what you're talking about, I mean, people are they're almost falling out of their chair this morning. They're listening to this and they're like, man, Jason is preaching like he's telling it like it is. for another group of people who may be more affluent, who may have moved into a neighborhood that they weren't in before, just newly arrived, folks from California coming here in droves, New York, all the different places, folks from Illinois coming here. Their reality might be, hey man, this is great. This is wonderful. Life is good. Cost of living is down here. All the different nonsense that we had to put up with is down here. Life is good, bro. This is utopia. This is what flourishing looks like. And that literally, bro, could change from street to street here in Nashville the way that it is these days.
And the affluency, that's part of the problem is when I talk to the church, and James talks about show no partiality, right? Don't show it in the church. So I get an opportunity to address these issues like racism and segregation and things like that. But I also took a moment to recognize that one of the reasons why people in the church want to give partiality, say to the rich, because that's James's context, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that we have a lust for affluence and influence in our hearts. And we want it. And once we are in that circle and we get it, I mean, we start to live in that narrow bubble. And here it is. I don't want this to go away because this is where I am. And I feel like so many middle class, affluent Americans, and they live in this bubble, and they might have pity and like shell out a few things in the poor, but they really don't understand that the decisions we're making and the impact is because they still go home to a very comfy house with a comfy savings account. And I'm not saying that I'm impoverished. I'm not. I'm wealthy compared to so many other people. But what I am saying is that your virtue signaling does absolutely nothing. I don't care conservative or liberal. I'm not even talking about that spectrum. I'm just talking about the affluence in general. And so that's a lust that all of us have. And once you have it, it makes it very easy to make that distinction and push people aside, and you don't even realize it's happening. And so I have to guard my heart. The church has to guard their heart.
I have to guard my heart. Come on.
And I think when you're talking about those people in those blocks, they can, again, look with sympathetic eyes. But they still make these decisions that continue to impact poverty in ways it's not helping. And I think there's a lot of people who do get it. I think one of the people you're connected with, Project Nashville, that's a solid group.
Yeah, Project Connect.
Yeah, Project Connect. Yeah, that's a group that really understands it and gets it.
There's some incredible ministries that are beginning to come together. We'll talk more about that. Maybe we'll get some excerpts from an interview that I did with Sabrina Jones recently. And we respond to some of the things that she says in relationship to what's going on here in Nashville and some of the ways that we're trying to work together as a community of faith-based leaders to make some definite changes and some impact where we're at. All right, Jason, our time has come and gone. If you've been riding the train with us, it's unfortunately time for you to get off, but you can get back on next week. We're going to be showing up on Saturdays. So just carve out some time for us, carve out some comments for us. We'll be bringing some relevant topics to you all the time. And this is what we do. And by the way, there's dolphins that show up from time to time on the show. So Jason, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being a part of the experience. And I love you, bro. And we're going to get back at it and have some fun conversations. We're moving toward, hopefully, what is going to be an engaging and fun podcast. You can check out some of our conversations as you work through podcasts. I'll be putting some of our conversations up on my podcast channel, the Erskine Music Podcast Show. And so you won't want to miss those discussions as well, as we talk about that from a music vantage point and have a lot of fun on that show as well. Thanks, Jason.
You too, bro.
We out.
Just dance, everybody.